Hi, I'm Alexander Russo with The Grade, and this is the Education Show, and I'm delighted to be here today with Erica Green. Erica, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Russo.
We are so happy to have you talk about education journalism, which you haven't been able to do for a while because you've officially at least been away. Welcome back to the beat.
Thank you.
What's it like this last week almost? What's it been like for you talking about the book and getting reactions from podcasters and the public?
Yeah. It feels like an amazing homecoming. This book is a culmination, I feel, of so much of what I covered my entire education reporting career, which, was 13 years. And it really has felt like, everything that I poured into this book, all of the takeaways, all of the experiences and families and stories that I've covered since my time in Baltimore to the New York Times and covering education across the country is reflected in this book. And so it's been really overwhelming. It's gotten a great reception, great reviews, I was so much less worried about the whether it would be received positively or get, any acclaim. What I really wanted was for people to understand what the book was actually about. And it has been incredibly heartening to see that, people actually got what it was about. They didn't just like it or think it was a great story. They understood that it was uncomfortable and complicated and nuanced. There's no easy solutions or fixes. There wasn't just this selective outrage. People, understood that this story revealed a lot of what we already knew, and we just kind of said the quiet parts out loud. So
Right.
it's been great. It's been really great.
When I first started sharing the news that the book was out and that what it was about, the thing I kept getting was, "How did the kids do in college?" Um,
hmm
what what's the reaction you've been getting, and what is the book about? What's the uncomfortable truth the book is about, according to you?
Yeah, first of all, it just shatters this, myth of that meritocracy drives opportunity, and especially in the higher education system. The book shows how throughout history we have always placed these punishing pressures to perform on Black children, and when they succeed, we celebrate, and when they don't, the failure is on them, and we sought to turn that narrative upside down. The failure is not on them; it is on this country. And so, we use Black children, particularly the miracle children, who make it into these very narrow, uh, very these ivory towers. We use them as avatars of success. They kind of provide a relief valve. They show that, the system can work. And so, we celebrate these these few exceptions, and it frankly allows us to not change anything for the vast majority of students who don't get into the ivory towers, right? Like, it's so much easier to celebrate those who overcome the barriers than it is to actually tackle these obstacles that have existed in this country since Brown v. Board.
Right.
So yeah, that's, those are some of the parts that we say out loud and show in painstaking detail. And as far as how the students did in college, we do have a Where Are They Now? I'm not gonna give it all away, but look, even in the story that we published in 2018, you could see that there were some who did well, others who graduated from Ivies and elite schools by the skin of their teeth.
Right.
Um, then there were some who left because they wanted to. Some dropped out, some failed out. So it's a mixed bag, and frankly, that's the case
Right.
for a lot of students in America,
Right. And,
right? Like
and,
their
and it's sort of
trajectories
and
are
it's sort of not the and it's sort of not the point. The spotlight you're showing is on the system, both on
right.
what the Landrys did and on the university system, not so much on the kids.
Right.
One of the things I kept thinking about while I was reading the book and seeing you and Katie talk on Wednesday in New York was this thing that disability journalists call inspiration porn, where journalism will come in and we'll talk about a kid with a disability who does something that might not be expected of the kid with a disability. And the journalist who's educated me the most on this is named Amy Silverman. She's in Arizona, and she talks about what a problem it is,
Mhm.
that the inspiration actually ends up hurting or demotivating the adults to do anything about the system that requires this Herculean heroic effort from individual kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that is the very much the same theme here. And I think that that is what we do, to any student um, who faces any particular challenge, whether it's race, socioeconomic class. I mean, look, we're celebrating how Mississippi pulled off a miracle right now, right? So yeah, and that's what TM Landry did. That's why the videos went viral. And look, I celebrated it. I shared those videos when they first came out, well before we did this story. So yeah, it becomes this kind of like perverse like entrapment, where unless they perform a miracle, or there's some kind of inspiration, we get to just preserve the status quo.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just what this book does is just it challenges all of us to think about, like, why is this so inspirational, and why is this so miraculous? And
What?
when we think really deeply about it, it's because we don't expect certain children in this country to be able to succeed. And I mean, that's a hard truth. And it's something that no one really wants to admit or come to terms with or never really thought about. And so that's what we hope this book does. And there are students with disabilities in this book, and you'll see the challenges that they faced in public schools before they got to TM Landry.
Mhm.
Actually, the Landrys really gravitated to students with disabilities.
Mm.
They actually, told parents, these schools failed you and your student, but we can make them geniuses. And the families, with students with disabilities were particularly vulnerable, because so many schools had given up on their kids. And then on the other end, you had students who were brilliant and were at really great elite private schools in Louisiana, who transferred to TM Landry very late in their educational careers. So they went into TM Landry incredibly prepared. So yeah, the range of what they were able to the range of students that they were able to recruit, the promises that they were able to make, based on whatever vulnerability the families had, was quite remarkable. But again, it's because they were able to identify the gaps in the education system that have failed so many students for so long.
This next question may be a little bit hard to answer, or maybe easy, but I'm curious. The journalist of 2018 and the journalist of 2026. Um, how have you changed as a journalist? How did working on the book uh, change you or change for you over that period of time? Has anything gotten clearer or less clear than it was? It seems so long ago.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a great question. You know, I've become, how do I say, frankly, a lot more radicalized.
Yeah,
um,
that's
and
exactly the word I was thinking.
Yeah, I really have. A good example of that is like, in 2018, I did an interview and I said, after the story broke, and I said, they didn't need to do this. These students could have gotten into these schools on their own.
Hmm.
And like 2026, Erica, that's not true. Like that's not like, and I was so idealistic, and I'm like, and now I'm like, they absolutely probably could not have gotten into these schools on their own, because the way they, like, these schools were not created for them. They like, and also we just know that, Varsity Blues also, that scandal broke
Right.
1 month after this one. And
Right.
so like the juxtaposition of the TM Landry students and their families and the
Hmm.
wealthy famous families, just the wealth gap, the access gap,
Hmm.
was just so stark.
Right.
um
Was
and
that was that what radicalized you? Was it part of the reporting process that made you realize, oh, this is actually much worse than I thought it was?
Yeah, I mean, it was like it showed, the Varsity Blues scandal showed what the TM Landry students were up against, in just stark view. Like, we had not seen a scandal like Varsity Blues. I mean, we all knew about legacy admissions. We knew people bought their way into school, but to see it laid out in painstaking detail, like, I was like, how do the TM Landry students ever stand a chance against this, right?
Hmm.
And then it was also, over the course of reporting the book, um, I also was like, these students don't need to go to these institutions. Like, I wrote a story even a couple years after about students brilliant Black students who had, who had been prepared specifically for an Ivy League,
Hmm.
had gained, admission to Ivy League schools and chose to go to HBCUs, right? Like, these schools are not the end all and be all. Um, the students at TM Landry, I mean, some of them left the schools that they had gotten into and went to the University of Lafayette
Right.
because they wanted to be closer to home and they wanted to be mentally healthy and safe. Um, and so yeah, I mean, just over the course of the book, like
Mm.
my my assumptions changed. I also reflected back on my time as an education reporter and thought about how I fed into this narrative, especially the idea of miracle children and how I covered test scores. For years at the Baltimore Sun, for example, we published every single school's test scores every year and rank them. And I covered cheating scandals that ruined people's lives and shamed entire schools of children. And like, that was under No Child Left Behind. And like, I now think about how we did this to students and to educators. Obviously, none went to jail like in Atlanta, but for a measure that literally no one remembers anymore. That's
Mm.
gone. So
Mm.
like, we I thought a lot about reformers. I thought a lot about how we, revered this idea that like Black children needed to be like whipped into shape, or
Right.
I mean, there's a part of the book, and when we talk about the abuse that happened at TM Landry, we revered these like Joe Clark reformers who,
Hmm.
and these like kind of white savior reformers who were,
No
you could,
excuses. No
yeah,
excuses schools. Yeah.
exactly. And so that's all to say, yes, I became a lot more radicalized,
Mm.
and also just did some deep reflection about, how my, how, with all the right intentions, because everyone knows I have stood up for children, my whole career, but in my power, with my powerful platform, I definitely, um, I helped like kind of feed a lot of the narratives that we now see in the book, are just have been so consequential and detrimental. So anyway, that,
When you come back and see, or when you glance at education stories or the education journalism community that you and I both know so well, do you see a similar reflection and recalibration, or do you see the 2018 juggernaut, just the approach, the traditional approach to covering schools remaining dominant?
yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on I think it really depends on the reporter.
Okay.
You know, there are there are several reporters that I've respected my whole career who I think have evolved with the times.
Okay.
And that's been, I'm not going to say names, but yeah, and they keep kids at the forefront. They question and challenge what success really looks like, what it should look like.
Hmm.
And you know, we're in, so much has happened. Look, like COVID happened. I think
Hmm.
that changed all
Yeah.
of us as
Yeah.
education reporters.
Yeah.
And yeah, that changed all of us, and we saw like what was really at stake. And I think we covered it really well. You know, George Floyd has happened since 2018.
Hmm.
President Trump has come back to office since 2018. So I will say I have been really happy to see most of the education reporting core really evolve and rise to like the moment we're living in. And so that's been consistent.
Let's talk a little bit about highs and lows of the last week or so that you've been talking about this book incessantly.
Yes.
I've seen you a couple times live or on replay. I've seen you get a little heated sometimes. I've seen you seem really happy sometimes. What are people getting right about the book, and what are people missing or
Yeah.
misusing?
You know, it's so people understand that TM Landry did not, you know, happen in a vacuum, right? Like, and that is really great. And they're understanding that, you know, all this whole scam revealed a much larger scam that we all have been living in for more than 50 years.
Right.
So people are getting that right, and they're appreciating the historical context. They're appreciating that there are no, you know, there are lots of villains in this story, beyond Mike and Tracy Landry. They're, you know, they're recognizing that, like, you know, the TM Landry students do not need pity. What they need is for, you know, that's how they got here in the first place. What they need is for people to take lessons from their experiences, with them in whatever, whether you're a college admissions counselor, a guidance counselor in a high school. Um, so that has been great. You know, the times that I've gotten heated is when, you know, everyone wants to know how the kids are doing. And when we say, you know, some of them just have great lives, they started a business. You know, we did have someone ask if, you know, that meant that they just accepted failure, and that really pissed me off, because the particular kid they were talking about, was brilliant, had a daughter, started a power washing company, lives in his very rural, like two room house with his family. And he could not be happier. He did not finish school. He left during COVID, actually, because he wanted to be home. And that is his American dream, to
So
have,
people, so sorry to interrupt. So people are
yeah,
getting it wrong. People are
yeah. People think
focusing
that,
on the kids. People are focusing too much on the kids' success at elite schools. Is that the part
right.
they're getting wrong?
That's it. And I mean, I understand it, because whether they did well or not, I think people are looking for an answer of, you know, to what that says about these elite schools, which that's not what this book is about, right? I mean, it is, but they want to make a judgment call about the system based on whether or not the kids succeeded in their eyes or not. And that misses the point, right?
Right.
And they want to label them successes or failures based on this small subset of schools, and that's just like mind blowing because that's how we got here in the first place, right?
Right. Right.
But that hasn't happened much, like truly. That people, it's still early. I give it another month to see if people really got it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that so far people really get it.
Well, I appreciate you saying this though, because I felt like people were focusing too much on the kids and not in a particularly sympathetic way, in a
Yeah,
thumbs up, thumbs down kind of way, which, as
correct.
you've said several times here and previously, is really not the point of the book.
Right, right.
I
One
talked.
thing that hasn't happened is I was bracing for a huge debate about affirmative action.
Mm,
Um, in a reviewer actually brought it up, and it was a really thoughtful review because he wrote that those who wanted to could use this book to say, see, this is why affirmative action needed to go away,
mm,
because it was exploited,
hmm
and that hasn't happened.
hmm
Um, I mean, again, I'll give it another few weeks.
let's hope it doesn't. The,
Wait.
the thing that I've been waiting to happen that hasn't happened is for people to try to use the book as a way to exonerate traditional public schools and vilify private schools. You may
Yeah,
see it differently, but the way I see it, every parent who came to Landry, their kid wasn't getting something that they needed at the local school, and Landry's just one fairly extreme example. I wouldn't want to exonerate the public system or vilify unregulated private schools, which we're about to have a lot more of in
right.
the coming years. Either way, I haven't seen it get pulled in there, and now I feel like we've just jinxed the book.
No, well, it's coming. I'm bracing. I think again, it's only been a few days, so I want people have to read it and digest it, and yeah, I don't think if you read it, you cannot exonerate the public
No,
schools.
but
You cannot.
that would require people reading the book, which they
Yes.
should do, but may not.
Yeah.
I talked to your co-author Katie a few days ago, and I told her that I thought that the book, that then and now, I thought the book and the scandal revealed a real blind spot on the part of education journalists, because the Landry story seems flimsy,
Hmm.
and all someone would have had to have done would have been to have asked the kid to say something in Mandarin if he hadn't taken Mandarin.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I tend to be hypercritical of the community that I'm a part of, the education journalism community.
A
Do
little
you
bit.
do you now think that this was a big blind spot, that the story shouldn't have been in the Post and NPR and the Globe, and do you feel like this is something that someone should have caught?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard. Like, you're hypercritical. I tend to not be critical because everyone has their own process. I think about schools. I mean, look, parallel example. We covered the KIPP schools forever, and they are hardcore college prep schools. Like pre-kindergartners are wearing like Ivy League sweatshirts, right? That's their whole model.
Yeah.
Did we ever question them? Right? Like, did we ever say like, did anyone say this seems a little much for a kindergartner to be picking out their college? Um, so I mean, it's interesting because we went back and and obviously had to look at all of the coverage and watch all of the news clips, um, and you will see that there were a couple of skeptical journalists. I'm not going to say one, but there a very prominent television network did an interview with Mike and Tracy,
Uh-huh.
and the reporter does have this moment where they're like, it seems a little too good to be true. Like, is this is this real? You know, I mean, he didn't say it in
Mhm.
those terms, but he challenged them.
Mhm.
And the way that they were able to blunt any skepticism was to like use Black children as shields. They were like, well, why are you questioning them? Should they,
Right.
like, if this, you know, if they were excelling at sports, you wouldn't be
Mhm.
doing this.
Right.
You know, they use this like, why are you questioning whether or not Black children can succeed? And that immediately makes people back
Mhm.
off.
Mhm.
So they had their they kind of they had their shield for any skepticism.
But why does that shield? I mean, the saying, I've been told that the first thing you learn in journalism school is if your mom says she loves you, check it out.
Check it out. I know.
So why did the journalist with the instinct towards skepticism back off? Why the backing off?
Because no one wants to be the one to either present or reinforce a narrative that Black children can't do extraordinary things.
But
Uh,
you obviously can't. I mean, first of all, that's journalism's one of journalism's main jobs is to be
yeah,
skeptical, and you and Katie obviously found the mind space to come in and be the skunks at the garden party.
yeah,
So how come some journalists can deflect the racial shield, deflect the you're being racist attack
right.
and just be honest and skeptical?
I mean, I'm not gonna, I can't, I don't know. I mean, it's the same question of like every time, especially if you're a local journalist, and Liz and I dealt with this at the Sun, you know, if there was a school that performed incredibly well on standardized tests,
Mhm.
like we did wonder whether they cheated. Um, and we found that some of them did. But so I don't want to like it's not like Katie and I saw the videos and said, let's go to Louisiana and figure out if this is real. Like we got a tip. And so I'm not going to sit here and say I just was so skeptical that I did my journalistic due diligence.
Mhm.
Um, you know, we got a tip that it wasn't real. So and I will say we later found out that there were at least two other journalists who were looking into TM Landry when we
Mhm.
published our story.
Mhm.
And I'll give one shout out. One was Rachel Cohen. But again, we kind of had we had this handed to us. So it's hard for me to sit here and say that journalists coulda, woulda, shoulda, especially national ones. We don't, you know, it's a school in Louisiana. I don't
Mhm.
know, you know, why the Times Picayune or the Advocate you know, didn't question. But I will say when you're a local reporter um and you're, you know, you're covering these schools in your community every day,
Mhm.
you build a trust and you give the benefit of the doubt
Mhm.
and you do what do your best. So yeah, I don't know. I can't sit here and say that because the videos, you know, seem too good to be true, people should have questioned them. Or I mean, I don't know. It's all circumstantial.
Right. I may be wrong about this, and I was radicalized or feel radically different now about the world and about journalism, in large part thanks to the COVID shutdown of the schools.
Yeah.
Um, but I do have the sense, both pre-COVID with issues like integration or affirmative action, and then during COVID with issues about community safety and prolonged school shutdowns. I do have the feeling that it's very hard for journalists in our ivory tower, and especially, frankly, those of us who are white, which is most of us uh,
Hmm.
on the education beat as everywhere else. It's very hard for us to report in situations where accusations of racism are flying around. It's just very hard to stay calm and
Yeah.
not want to just pull back. You described the journalist who Mike Landry backed off.
Yep.
I'm guessing that was a white journalist. It's a very
It's a
very
block.
uncomfortable position to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really is, and that's why I can't. I know I gave a very long roundabout answer about who should have done what when and whether journalists should have, and that's kind of what I'm saying. Like you don't want to be the one because look, if it were a school of white students,
Mhm.
the videos wouldn't have gone viral,
Mhm.
but B, no one would have wondered if it was true. And
Right.
no, and we have a lot of elite white private schools that send tons of kids to Ivy Leagues every year, and no one's asking whether or not, no one's expressing skepticism about how they got there. So
Mhm.
that's like that's right. Like you don't want to be the one. And as a Black reporter doing this story, it was really tough. Like I was sick about this. I like I went dark for a week after that story published,
Mhm.
be, because I knew I was about to publish a story that was going to reinforce what people thought anyway. Like
Mhm.
these kids are on these college campuses. As a Black reporter, even at one of the most elite, media organizations in the country, we know that people are questioning if we got there because we deserved it. So these kids were already, at Harvard and Stanford and Yale, and people looking at them wondering if they got there because of affirmative action.
Right.
Um, and so I was sick about that, and I will say, like, there was at one school someone said to me, we get, we're there's this big push for us to be diverse, and we try, and look what happened,
Mm.
with like such disdain. And I just was like, I mean, it was awful. And
And what did
so
you do with that?
which
What
was a huge factor.
what did you do in the book that you didn't do in 2018? What were you able to do in the book so that you didn't feel like you were just reinforcing stereotypes?
Yeah. I was able to let the families have their say. Like I wanted, that is why we did the book.
Mhm.
Books are hard. I'm not like I don't want to be an author. I have a day job that is already hard enough.
Yeah.
Um so I didn't do this because I just have some burning desire to be an author. I allowed the families to to tell people why they went to TM Landry, what led them there, what their hopes were.
Mhm.
Um, the students are so smart. It's a student driven book. Yes, we brought the history and all of that, but
Mhm.
a lot of the history that we include was because the thrust of what the students' experiences were like reflected that history.
Mhm.
So we honestly we just got to allow their stories to breathe. Um, we got to go beyond the scandal. We got to remind people in this book that they are like human beings,
Mhm.
um, and not just like tokenized students who needed to be pitied
Mhm.
and protected, and so yeah, that's it. Like we got to, and we got to like remind the country that this is just as much their fault as it is the Landrys.
Right. One last question, and then I'll let you go. Thank you so much for
Sure,
doing this.
of course.
What happens? This is going to come out about a week after the book came out last week.
Okay.
What happens next? I know you've got your day job, obviously.
Yeah.
Are you, and I know you've got a little bit of a tour that continues the next week. Are
Yeah.
you going to be on shows that you can tell us about? What happens after, let's say, Tuesday?
Yeah. I mean, Tuesday. So the we've done our media tour. I mean, things might come up. I don't think so, but they have just been popping up day to day.
Okay.
I mean, the big thing for us was getting through this week and getting to Louisiana. So that's like the
Which is going to happen on Monday, right?
on Monday. Yeah, we'll be there for 3 days. You know, it's very important to, we're going to reunite with the families. We were the New York Times, big fancy paper, touchdown in Louisiana, set off a grenade and left.
Yeah.
And Mike Landry also, told the community, they don't care about you. Like the
Mhm.
New York Times was just here to exploit you and get a good story. And like, so we have obviously stayed invested for years. And facing the families, and this community. We have a book talk in the community.
Yeah.
We're going to be questioned by the education reporter from that community, which is going to be tough and it's going to be great. I was
This
really
is
heartened.
Ashley.
Ashley, yeah. So we get through that. We'll be at MLK Library next Thursday with Adam Harris, a very, as you know, well respected education reporter who's
Yeah.
wrote the definitive, story about higher education, particularly for Black children in this country. So I think that's going to be a very, very thoughtful but
Yeah.
tough conversation. And then I'm going to spend time with my children. That's what, like, I'm going to spend time with my children and until the next blitz. But no, I don't think we have any more
Okay.
um,
I'm
media
so
tour.
glad you don't need me to say this, but I did not go back to the high school that I wrote a book about 15 years ago. I did not go back with the book. I sent the book and made sure everyone had it, but I didn't go back and sit in the auditorium and take questions.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm really glad that you're going back to the community and doing that. That's really honorable and will be really interesting.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. It's going to be very emotional. This is, and that's another thing. The families have, they got their books before it was released, and it's like it's traumatizing. Like they're reliving like a big trauma in their lives, and even the kids, even though they're not kids anymore, they're young adults. Like, we've all been talking. It's hard to go back and read about yourself in like one of the worst experiences of your life that now the whole world knows about again. So yeah, I think that's like the wrapping up that I'll feel a lot more settled and like
Right.
we did something good here. So
Yeah. Well, you definitely did something good, at least according to me. Congratulations on the book.
thank
Thank you
you.
so much for sharing your thoughts about this as a current, former, always education journalist.
Always education journalist. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.